The history of West Virginia's institutions predates its statehood. In 1858, the Virginia legislature approved funds for an institution on land that would later become West Virginia. It was called the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, later renamed Weston State Hospital. For the next 100 years, places like these were replicated across the state and nation. Intended to provide treatment and training, they soon became overcrowded and understaffed. Deplorable conditions brought public outcry, spurring historic change in West Virginia and elsewhere. A new word entered conversations in the State House, courthouses, and communities across the Mountain State: deinstitutionalization. It signified a new philosophy towards supporting people in communities and away from the inhumane conditions spawned in sprawling institutions, often isolated from cities and towns.
I just have such a memory of seeing people in the back wards of Huntington State Hospital and Weston State Hospital and later on Cullen Anderson Center. There were these very large rooms with toilets along the wall, no doors, no stalls, just open toilets. A lot of people had no clothes on. People were milling around, and it might have been the second time I went back that I realized that the reason they were milling around was there were no chairs. There might have been a television in a cage up on the wall.
Sharon Satoros had her own disturbing encounter with the back wards at Cullen Anderson Center when a staff person took her into them.
Some of them had pajama tops. Some of them had pajama bottoms. Nobody had both. Some of them had none. Their day consisted of hurting themselves and hurting others, or crunched in the corner, catatonic. They had a small little box if they had anything that was their possessions. And that's how they lived, day after day after day.
In the 1960s, Gail Falk worked in Alabama and Mississippi as a teacher and activist as the growing civil rights movement confronted America with the inhumanity of racism. She later became a lawyer, arriving in West Virginia in 1971, and played a key role in lawsuits on behalf of people with developmental disabilities, whose often forgotten lives in the state's institutions shocked her.
It just boggled my mind that all these years that I'd been in Mississippi, right next door, things were just as bad for people, but they were behind brick walls and we didn't see them.
For both women, the suffering in West Virginia's institutions was not just an urgent issue for the state to address, but a deeply personal one. Both were mothers of children with developmental disabilities who, if things had played out differently, may have been among those trapped for much of their lives in a back ward, far from home and community.
I grew up in a household where it didn't matter what your religion was, what your race was, what your nationality was, as long as you were smart. And suddenly I was the parent of a child who wasn't smart and had serious intellectual disabilities, and I just knew that's what I had to learn about. So I took the job as the lawyer for the Disability Law Project, and within about 2 months on the job, the Association for Retarded Citizens asked the health department to let them go on a tour of all the state institutions, and they invited me to go along, and that's when I saw what was behind those brick walls.
The young mother, now established in West Virginia's capital city, was fortunate to find a school system able and willing to work with her child, John Nicholas, who had his own special needs.
There was a public school program in Charleston for more oriented to physically handicapped children, with a fabulous teacher, a big sunny classroom, and I would drop my son off in this nice sunny classroom after we'd eaten breakfast together and drive up to Cullen Anderson Center and see the crib ward, which the crib ward is a very, very, very large room full of metal cribs with small people in it. I knew that the only thing standing between my son and the crib ward was me, and I needed a system to help me keep him out of that. I couldn't do it myself.
In the late 1970s and for much of the 80s, Falk played a significant role in two sweeping court cases that laid the groundwork and framed the legal and moral arguments for moving people with developmental disabilities out of the state's asylums, the landmark Medley court decision and the Hartley case. But what awaited these individuals and the communities to which they returned? That was the other half of this sea change in the state, creating systems of support that people needed in order to thrive in their new home.
It really was the beginning of this movement that just excited me. It was almost like my civil rights movement. I'd been very intrigued and troubled by the civil rights issues in the 1960s when I was just a kid, and I could see this in this movement now that was rising up for people with disabilities, including developmental disabilities. There was a job in West Virginia at the Developmental Disabilities Council. And I applied, and I was just delighted to get the job and to come here. I had never been here before, but I'd heard a lot about what West Virginia was doing in terms of closing its institutions and developing services in the community for people. And I really wanted to be a part of that.
Between 1994 and 1997, Pratt and a team of writers and social workers fanned out to gather stories of folks who had lived in the state's institutions. A book resulted in 1998, sponsored by the West Virginia Developmental Disabilities Planning Council and the West Virginia Humanities Council. The book was titled On the Outside, a look at 2 decades of deinstitutionalization in West Virginia through the eyes of people with developmental disabilities. The book defined a developmental disability in this way. Developmental disability is a term used to describe a variety of conditions that begin sometime during childhood or before birth. They include conditions like cerebral palsy, autism, and brain injuries. They can result in impairments that are physical, mental, or both. They can range from mild to severe and are generally long-term.
It's always troubling to hear about people being denied their rights, people being abused or disrespected in any way, people having so little control over just their day-to-day life. These were all people that had capabilities. They were able to do things, they were able to make choices, but there really weren't many choices that they were able to make, and spent a lot of their days doing nothing or things that didn't matter to them. That's troubling. That's troubling. It's not just the situations you hear about people being overtly abused. It's about watching people whose lives have been stolen from them. One thing that struck me in all of the stories is that relationships were probably the most important factor in people's lives, and that included in the institutions and in the community. There were a number of people who told us stories of staff people that had been good friends to them, some whom would take them home for Christmas dinner, who were kind. But beyond that, in terms of life opportunities, there was nothing. I mean, there was no opportunity to do meaningful work, to go to a job, to do the things that we just so take for granted. Going to the grocery store and having a list of what you want to eat for dinner that night. Being invited to go to a neighbor's cookout down the street.
Pratt recalls from the book the story of Teresa, who lived in a state institution for quite a bit of her childhood, due largely to an undetected hearing loss that made it hard for her to learn. She later ended up having her own apartment with, significantly, her own keys, where she lived by herself.
She was a woman probably in her 30s by that time. And during the day, for a while, she went to a sheltered workshop and a training program there. But then she got a job at a fast food restaurant where she worked for many, many years. She was named Employee of the Month several times and had a full life. And she's still living in her apartment today. She has a boyfriend, she has a life. Okay, so let's go back to the Colin Anderson Center again. And do you remember the day that your parents took you there?
They said I was slow at school, and they said they need to put me in a place where other people could help me out. It hurt me a little bit because she wouldn't come up to see me for a while. My mom wouldn't. And I said, why won't my parents come up to see me? She said, I don't know. And then they come up for a long time.
So for all those years that you did live there, were there times that you wished you could go home?
Yeah, but they said I couldn't. They said, no, you can't go home, you gotta stay here.
Did they say why?
They said because this is an institution, and they said this is where the doctor said you need to be for right now. You gotta be in here.
Did you think you needed to be there?
I didn't know. I didn't know why they put me there for.
And Teresa, what do you think has been the hardest thing about living on your own?
It took me a long time to be out on my own. It took me a long time to see if I can live on my own. And they helped me out to catch the bus and do different stuff. Then that woman at Taco Bell, she helped me out too. Yeah, that's what I've ever had. I've been there for 23 years at Taco Bell.
You retired a few years ago, right?
Yeah. And when I left, the manager gave me a big party.
The path to crafting comprehensive, consistent support in communities for people moved out of state wards and asylums was a huge challenge and remains one. There was so much to change, after all. In 1983, as a young reporter with the Huntington Herald-Dispatch, I went undercover for 3 months as a volunteer at this institution, then known as the Huntington State Hospital, now the Mildred Mitchell Bateman Hospital. On an initial visit to the old Unit 4 building, whose left and right wings were built in the round, the volunteer coordinator tells me it was constructed that way so patients couldn't hit their heads against corners, and she added, so the devil wouldn't have anywhere to hide. Cigarette smoking, allowed on wards at 8 a.m., 10 a.m., noon, and 2 p.m., was a highlight of many a patient's day in poorly staffed back wards where unclothed patients might be found curled on the floor near their own urine or aimlessly staring off in crowded rooms. Yet burgeoning lawsuits and tireless advocates were busy trying to change things. Steve Weissman came to West Virginia in 1982 to work on the Medley Project, which sprang from efforts to implement the court order in the case of Maisel Medley, who ended up at Spencer State Hospital after she had been abused as a child and teen. Yet because she had intellectual disabilities, instead of finding a safer home for her, the state institutionalized her as if she had a problem. The case exposed a systemic bias in the way the lives of developmentally disabled people were viewed in West Virginia.
There's not an accommodation in the community for them, but really a lot of the thinking was it's not good for the rest of your family, for the valued people in your family. Basically, the subtitle to that would be. And so oftentimes families would be counseled to put your child where they can get the right care. The state will take care of them. And it's better for you to just drop them off and forget about them. I think the professionals particularly, but it was people of all stripes, people in your experience, people in your community who had that automatic reflex of, well, a special child needs a special place where the very special people can do those special things with them. And they need to be with their own kind. That was still a phenomenon today, even if people don't say it out loud, there's a sense of that. Then you segregate them as a society And oftentimes these institutions were out in the country, far away from other people, so you had that distance as well.
Wiseman would come to spend his career working on behalf of people living with developmental disabilities, moving on from the Medley Project as institutions began closing, with the final one, Colin Anderson, shuttering in 1998. At the heart of the work was helping people find community-based lives and a sense of home outside of locked doors and distant locations.
And I moved from that job to be the director for the Division of Developmental Disabilities in West Virginia. And it was during that time that we closed Greenbrier Center and Colin Anderson Center, the two specific facilities for people with developmental disabilities in West Virginia. After the closure, I moved to the Developmental Disabilities Council to be, to get out of, I guess, the operations of doing things into more of an advocacy training, research, demonstration. People need a lot of the good things in life. The good things in life include being safe and feeling safe from harm. But that also includes a home. Something people call home, something people feel are home, something that is home. Not called by others to be your home, but something that has the characteristics of home. But what they really come to find is, my home is making no small decisions in life. My home is something that I can let you in or not let you in. You know, I can come and go, I can do things. I have control. But probably one of the most important, if not the most important, is relationships. Relationships of all stripes.
These are my three daughters. That one is Jenny when she was 20. And it's just a beautiful picture. So this is Jenny and her little sister Gina at Virginia Beach.
Sharon Satoros brought three daughters into the world. One of them, Jenny, would need lifelong assistance because of her developmental disabilities and inability to speak. Jenny was at the Colin Anderson Center back in the 1970s, an often painful sojourn recounted in On the Outside. She has been living out in the community since 1979, now able to speak her needs and wishes via sign language and communication devices. Yet this change has not come without constant, often exhausting advocacy by her determined mother.
This is Jenny in the pool at Shepherd College. I had worked really, really hard to get Shepherd College and her little segregated school to develop a program at Shepherd for all the children.
The Medley Court decision guaranteed help for families caring for previously institutionalized children. Jenny went to the Potomac Center every other weekend, while support staff came into her family home, which gave Sharon time to spend with her other children. One of the staff assigned to Jenny was a 20-year-old college student, Cheryl. Her support and blossoming friendship with Jenny brought to life the promise of a very big word, deinstitutionalization, in changing specific lives back home in specific communities.
Cheryl called me one time. She said, we're going to go to Pizza Hut on Friday night in her little blue truck. Do you mind if there's other people there? I said, no, I don't mind. She said, do you mind if there is beer on the table and people are drinking the beer? I said, you going to give it to Jenny? She said, no. And I said, are you going to be drinking it and driving? No. I said, I don't mind a bit. And so you could find Jenny out there at Pizza Hut with a great big gang of people all yelling and talking and music and going on, and Jenny having a blast. You could also find her and Cheryl just tooling around on the streets, just checking stuff out, and music just blasting and having a good time. And that was when I lifted up. I've always said this thing about bloop, and you realize, oh, she doesn't need to be living with me all her life. She needs to be living her life. And she needs to be living it as independently as possible. And that, to me, was the whole purpose of deinstitutionalization.
Yet, for families with members with developmental disabilities, constant advocacy is ever needed, even a quarter century after the big changes wrought by deinstitutionalization, says Satoros.
That's where we are now, with services being very unstable. I'm just hoping that it gets a whole lot better, because it's exhausting. What happens is then I become the voice for Jenny, and then the agency hates me. And I can't back down. I can't concede anything for Jenny, because it's not me that loses, it's Jenny.
Countless lives were changed dramatically by rethinking and recasting how West Virginia should address the challenge of supporting the best life possible for its citizens with developmental disabilities. James Gallagher is among them. He now owns his own house in Frankfort, West Virginia, and counts his blessings. He shared the remarks he made before the state legislature as it has pondered in recent times whether to revive, in smaller form, institutional care.
My name is James Gallagher. I lived in institution called Cooper for a long time. It was a long time ago, and I don't remember much about living there. I do remember that the other people told me what to do and when to do it. I like my life better now. I work 2 jobs for extra money. I like to go play golf with friends, and if it's got to go on vacation, and I don't go God, I don't want to have to go back to the institution ever. I like having my own house and things.
From 2 different stints in the West Virginia state legislature, Barbara Fleischauer served more than a quarter century in the State House. First elected in 1995, she was a legislator when the Colin Anderson Center closed its doors in 1998.
People were put into these institutions without a trial, without any asking what they wanted. It was really more of like, we know what is best for you, and we're going to put you in there for the rest of your life. And so it's kind of like a prison sentence. It isn't kind of like a prison sentence, it's the equivalent of prison. And we have very strict rules for taking away somebody's liberty. So these people essentially had their liberty taken away from them. And that's a tension between what is good for a person, what's in their best interest, and what is in society's best interest, and making sure we listen to people, that they have their say, in that issue. And sometimes that's really hard when somebody can't talk, or it has limited intellectual abilities. So they maybe don't know what their alternatives are. But now it is more personal, and it feels much more real. I'm very scared. I have a granddaughter who is severely intellectually disabled. We don't know what her future is going to be. And it's very scary as a parent. It's scary for us as grandparents, because we want to make sure that after we're gone, that she's taken care of. But we don't want her to not be able to celebrate holidays with her family. She's beautiful, she's cheerful, she's fun. We don't want her to be warehoused. That's what's so tricky about all this, is that you want to make sure that people have the services they need throughout their lifespan, just like we have Social Security to make sure that our elderly aren't living in poverty. That wasn't a given until much more recently. It should be a given that you can live as independently as possible, and there's going to be a range of solutions for what independent living means.
A few years ago, Lindsay Fry was appointed by the Governor's Office to the Developmental Disabilities Council. She is a strong advocate for those like herself who live with disabilities and who seek, just like everyone else, to live their best life possible.
It's not the answer to put people with disabilities in institutions. I couldn't talk when I was a kid but now I can. I was scared when I speak up because the way I talk, I have a paralyzed vocal cord. I'm going to be an advocate for others, people like me. If people don't have a voice, like non-verbal, I'm going to advocate for them as well. If you can find your voice, just remember that, yes, it is like baby steps, but you will get there, and always never give up. You can use your voice. If you need someone, be there with you, coach you through it, or advocate for you. That's all I tell, because just don't be afraid.
Linda Higgs has been a longtime policy analyst, advocate, and trainer with the West Virginia Developmental Disabilities Council. The path that led to such work began decades ago at a personal level with her daughter Maria, who would live to just age 18. By the time Maria was born, children with developmental disabilities couldn't be consigned for life to institutions anymore. But the challenge of supporting parents at home and having enough community care and local staffing has long bedeviled the movement to get folks out of institutions.
One of the positives that came from deinstitutionalization in West Virginia was the IDD waiver program, so that people could be supported to live in their home and in their community. It allowed people to receive supports from, there were several behavioral health agencies who employed people who could work with someone who had a developmental disability and help them access the community and learn skills. And it also supported parents to be able to raise their child at home, because there would never be enough people in West Virginia to be staff people, and so West Virginia allowed parents to be paid to provide those same services to their children. That was monumental. That was a monumental change, I believe, that allowed children to stay home and parents to get some support in providing care for them in their home.
Yet the ongoing problem of finding enough direct support staff in communities for families and individuals, and paying them well enough, leads Higgs to urge a specific change.
Well, there have been problems over the years with what has happened since deinstitutionalization, because there's still not enough support for people. There's not enough support staff for people. People say all the time that that's because the wages are so low. And the wages are low. You can work at McDonald's and have less responsibility, but get paid more. It's a huge responsibility to be responsible for another human being. And but people who provide services to them are not treated as if they're taking on a responsibility like that, or that they're very important at all. If West Virginia had a certification program for direct support professionals and a career path for them, more people would be interested in doing that work, because they could see that they could get promoted just like most other people want to see in their jobs.
Brandy Beery is the current chairperson of the West Virginia Developmental Disabilities Council. She brings her own family-focused perspective to the job.
I didn't really get into the disability community until I had my son, and he was diagnosed autistic at 4 years old. So this was very new and eye-opening for my family. And I realized real quick that I had to learn a whole different world to help my son get the best supports and value for living in our community and growing up. The interesting thing is, when I was finally on the council, part of my orientation for the council and learning about it, they gave me the book On the Outside. And I went home and I read that, and I had tears coming down, because when you first have a child that's diagnosed, you're in the now. You're not thinking about what happened 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. You're so in the now that it made it even more important of why I want to support my son even more because we cannot go back to that. I'm a firm believer that, you learn history so you don't repeat the bad parts. And that was a big deal when I read this, and I was like, this could have been my son easily. Just diagnosed, and this is what you do. You ship them away. And there is no need for them to leave their community. There's no need for anybody with a disability to have to live on the outskirts and be warehoused, as you said, because everybody has value. Value isn't about what your educational level is or how wealthy you are. Your value is what you bring to your community. That can be something as simple as being a greeter at a store or being a lawyer that reads documents. Everyone has value, and that should be within their community and no different than anyone else.
During the 25 years since the release of the book On the Outside, we've learned a lot about what it takes to support people with developmental disabilities in their communities. Many challenges remain, but the lessons are clear.
We know how to provide safe supports for people that keep the community safe and keep the individual safe and keep the staff safe. We know how to do it. It takes some money, but building an institution takes a lot of money too. So I think that's the fight we're fighting right now.
I think we need to be very vigilant on working on these challenges we still have in the community, but we hope that revisiting On the Outside will help people remember that we never found the solutions in large congregate settings. That was not where we found solutions. And that we need to keep working hard to uncover the things that will help people really protect their quality of life in the community today.
I want everybody to know that my son, I'm sorry, and others deserve a future where they're not sent away, and that they are important. And no matter how little or how much they can give, that it's valued by everyone that's around them. And that they can grow up and realize that they were a strong part and had something to offer to this world, because they do.